All right. Welcome to Discussions. I'm your host, Ian Hamilton Trottier. This is Wednesday. Thanks for your patience while I was off air last week. And we are rescheduling guest Kevin Shipp. He's a former CIA agent. And he will be joining the program to talk about the NSA. I will also be rescheduling April to June. She has 30 years in journalism, TV, print, and radio. She's a current anchor in Colorado. She's worked for Colorado Springs ABC affiliate KRDO 13. Also Kansas City KC Entertainment. She currently co-hosts America Matters show. Last time I was on air, that's 2 weeks ago, I hosted Paul Craig Roberts, former United States Assistant Secretary of the Treasury for Economic Policy under Ronald Reagan. His book, How America Was Lost, From 9/11 to the Police Warfare State, was of topic. Top 10 most influential people in the alternative news arena is Paul Craig Roberts. And last week, we're working on a mobile setup here at Wynwood Radio so that I am able to take the show mobily. For instance, last week I was on the West Coast and working through some equipment, software kind of issues. We're very close. So in the next week or two, possibly in the next couple broadcasts, expect a broadcast from a mobile location. I could be bringing the show to you from South Beach, Puerto Rico, for example. But last week's guest has been rescheduled for next week, Dr. Paul L. Williams. He has a BA in English from Wilkes University, has a Master's of Divinity. And he has a PhD in philosophy from Drew University. We'll be discussing his book, which the Washington Book Review is quoted as saying, is an inestimable, scholarly, and intellectual accomplishment which is unrivaled. That is the book titled Operation Gladio. Today, we'll be bringing in experts to talk about autism. They are with the Association for Behavioral Analysis International. Quote from the website, iantrottier.com. Though the spectrum for which autism is classified seems to be broadening, the bottom line, from an outsider's view, into research published in PubMed, that's a major medical publication, peer-to-peer researched and reviewed, is that autism diagnoses are on the rise, possibly at an alarming rate. Is autism becoming more common today? Yes is the reply from many experts. Since 1974, ABAI, the Association for Behavior Analysis International, which bases their approach to making kids with autism, or anybody with autism, more able to function, if that makes any sense, off of the philosophies of B.F. Skinner. Since 1974, ABAI has been the primary organization for the philosophy, science, application, and teaching of behavior analysis, a main approach to helping those with autism live a, here's a better word, improved life. Dr. Maria E. Marlotte, is a director in this institute. Dr. Ruth Ann Rehfeldt and Dr. Jonathan Tarbox will be joining the program. I believe Dr. Ruth Ann Rehfeldt and Dr. Jonathan Tarbox will be joining the program today. They are experts in the field, and they'll be on in about 10 minutes. Autism is a fact of life for many families globally, and I have the distinct opportunity to present these experts with a number of questions that have been given to me from listeners that are based in Canada. So I will be bringing that to the program today. It is important to take into consideration what are immunotoxins in our environment. And without honing in on those, one may be dispositioning themselves. Okay, sorry, I've got an issue with my pronunciation today. Themselves to developing various illnesses. Okay, but of concern today is what's going on in Syria. Okay, there's chemical warfare issues. I want to stray from topic for a moment and just play something for you briefly for your consideration, okay? And lining that out. Here we go.
No one is around. Kaboom, it goes off. And now check this out, what happens here. As soon as the smoke, the dust has settled, not even that, you're going to have people running into the scene. Running in, laying down like they've been hit or targeted, like they've been, damaged basically or hurt in this bomb. And then, of course, the media comes in, the cameras come in. These are like staged photo ops that you can then use in the Western media in whatever way you can. It's so dirty. It's incredible, and we have to question if this is what's happened in Syria too. Remember the Kuwait ambassador daughter who talked about children in incubators to justify the Iraq war. Check this out.
While I was there, I saw the Iraqi soldiers come into the hospital with guns. They took the babies out of the incubators. Took the incubators and left the children to die on the cold floor.
Right, so this is like this is a dumb portray of evil. This is like, cartoon version evil. And Lana, as we saw, they've done the same thing now. Look at what they showed on CNN, how they're pushing this young Syrian girl, selling the war effort to America and the rest of the world watching this. This is just despicable.
Bana, do you blame President Assad for this?
This is CNN.
Yes.
What is your message to President Assad?
I am very sad. A lot of died and no one helped them. The world is watching. The world doesn't do anything.
This child is reading from a teleprompter.
She's like reading from a teleprompter, the poor girl.
What does this young girl know about foreign policy and what's going on?
So there you go. That's an argument made, I believe it's from Red Ice TV. And you're asking yourself, Ian, what does that have to do with me, Henrik Palmgren? Palmgren is the host of that show or that particular segment. What does that have to do with me? Okay, and remember, I root my broadcast. This started over a year ago. January 2017 was my initial show, and we discussed colony collapse disorder. That is pesticides that kill honeybees. And when Naled was sprayed down here in Miami in the fall of 2016, just a few months before I started this show, this program, there were 3 million honeybees that died as a result of that chemical spraying, which is Naled. It's a pesticide that was used down here to kill the Zika virus. It was used outside of Charleston. And a result of the spraying of that pesticide was the death of 3 million honeybees. So what does that have to do with us? It has to do with the fact that if we don't have a healthy bee population, then that declines the dairy industry, the cotton industry, agricultural things like fruits and nuts. Okay, big impacts here. So the idea is then, does that benefit companies like Monsanto and genetically modified products and companies that benefit from us becoming more dependent on their products? Okay. Now, is there a link to autism? Chem-Talks, he's a guy I've been working with since day one. He's working on his PhD up in the Research Triangle of North Carolina. Chem-Talks, for instance, says that absolutely the immunotoxins, or the immunotoxicology elements of our environment, the toxins in our environment, are, for instance, from his studies, causing what he's saying is a rising epidemic in diabetes. Okay, so here we are, and we've got autism. Autism is on the rise. It seems autism is definitely on the rise. In the 60s, was vaguely diagnosed. What's going on? Why are these children acting odd? Well, in 2018, it's more easily identified. And the fact of the matter is, okay, previous guests that I brought on the show have discussed vaccines. They've discussed ingredients in vaccines like mercury that do nothing more for that particular vaccine than prolong shelf life of the drug. Okay? They have no health benefit to the recipient of the vaccine. And the argument is it is causing autism. Everybody's made up differently biologically, chemically. We are all different people. What are we predispositioned to genetically and in our DNA? But like Barbara Loe Fisher is dedicating her time in her life on Capitol Hill to trying to get some of these laws changed on Capitol Hill so that parents have more rights to vaccinate their kids. States like California, for instance, a parent has zero right. All the right is left to the state. Yet everything I found in Miami was that Zika, for instance, has no direct link. And that is through correspondence with researchers and scientists at the New England Journal of Medicine, Lancet Medical in the UK, and Washington University in St. Louis. That there is no direct link that Zika itself causes microcephaly. Fact is, there are kids out there with autism. This seems to be on the rise. So what do we do? How do we deal with it? And I'll be right back with two experts in the field to discuss that very item. And that is, we got autism. The kids have autism. What do we do about it? You've tuned into Ian Trottier. This is your Wednesday edition of Discussions. And you're on Winwood Radio.
Fraudulent, just you wait and see. First he was my money grip, then he stole my honey dip. Mr. Dabalina is a serpent, don't you agree? The little two-timer resembles Aunt Jemima with jeans and a dirty white hoodie. Seems like he wouldn't be a snake, or would he? Disguises come in all sizes and shapes. Notice the facade of the snakes. They all catch the vapes, even though last year there was GQ. Took a lot of time before the DEL could see through the mask. All I had to do is ask the Emperor and Kwame, and my man responded they were bomb, eh? Fraudulent flow with the strength of Hercules. The way you're on my dick must really hurt your knees. You need to take heed and quit being such a groupie. Ever since I did a little show in Guadalupe, I never saw a groupie like you. But what is funny is you wanted to be down with my crew, but DEL is not down with any clowns of justice. So I would suggest that you try to impress Uncle Fester, Dabalina, because you don't impress me, Dabalina. The style of dress is not the key, Dabalina. It's all in the mind and the heart, so you should start by remembering you gotta pay a fee, Dabalina.
Mr. Bob Dabalina, Mr. Dabalina, Mr. Bob Dabalina, Mr. Dabalina, Mr. Bob Dabalina, Mr. Dabalina, Mr. Bob Dabalina.
Glory, I was stupid, Mr. Bob Dabalina. Glory, I was stupid, Mr. Bob Dabalina. Glory, I was stupid, Mr. Bob Dabalina. Glory, I was stupid, Mr. Bob Dabalina.
Ooh, Mr. Dabalina. Ooh, Mr. Dabalina. Ooh, Mr. Dabalina. Ooh, Mr. Dabalina. Ooh, Mr. Dabalina. Ooh, Mr. Dabalina. Ooh, Mr. Dabalina. Ooh, Mr. Dabalina.
Mr. Dabalina, Mr. Bob Dabalina, 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 Mr. Dabalina, Mr. Bob Dabalina.
Okay, welcome back. This is Winwood Radio, and we have on the program today. Look, as I've discussed, it seems like autism is an issue. It seems to be affecting more and more children. It is on the rise. That's open to debate. But the fact of the matter is, autism is a neurological disorder and challenge for many families, not only nationally but internationally. And we are very fortunate today to have on Winwood Radio and to have on the program Dr. Ruth Ann Rehfeldt and Dr. Jonathan Tarbox. Are the two of you there with me?
Yes.
Yes, I am.
Hello.
Great
Thank you
to be
for the
here.
invitation.
So it's been, I think, a couple months, but I was fortunate enough to actually meet both of these experts in Miami as they were here for a conference with ABAI. And I'd like both of you, Ruth Ann and Jonathan, to briefly introduce yourselves, give listeners an idea who you are, what your field of expertise is, what institution you're tied into, what university. Just give us a quick background, both of you. And we'll start with Dr. Ruth Ann, please.
Sure. Well, I'm a professor of behavior analysis and therapy at Southern Illinois University here in Carbondale, Illinois. It's about 2 hours outside of St. Louis. Most people have no idea where Carbondale is. I've been working with individuals with autism spectrum disorder for probably close to 20 to 25 years, and my expertise has ranged from designing interventions based on programming for early language development, and now my graduate students and I are focusing more specifically on teens and young adults with high-functioning autism spectrum disorder. Much of our research lately has focused on a topic known as acceptance and commitment therapy, or acceptance and commitment training, which we are currently implementing in groups for teens and young adults with the disorder. Highly verbal, highly intelligent individuals with autism who are sort of struggling when it comes to planning out their future and thinking about things like employment and independent community living. And I'm the director of our institution's Center for Autism Spectrum Disorders.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Ruth Ann. Dr. Tarbox, would you please give us the background for yourself?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm the program director of the Master of Science in Applied Behavior Analysis program at the University of Southern California here in LA. And like Ruth Ann, I've been doing this for about 20 years, and I've really worked in a variety of different areas of expertise and a variety of different positions, working with families of folks on the spectrum, all the way from little kids, working on very earliest social skills and language skills, up to supporting adults in employment situations, and ranging from folks with real mild autism all the way to folks who are really severely affected by the disorder and need support in virtually every aspect of their life. And my passion is for training people and dissemination and getting access to services out there to a larger number of people. And also am specializing too, just like Ruth Ann, in acceptance and commitment training or acceptance and commitment therapy, and how that can be applied to training staff and parents to better cope with the stress and be more effective in providing treatment and support to individuals on the spectrum.
Fantastic.
And Ruth Ann and I both have been working together as co-chairs of the ABAI Autism annual convention, which is one of the biggest autism conventions in the world that focuses, actually it's the biggest one in the world that focuses on evidence-based treatment for individuals with autism spectrum disorders.
And that's great. And so the two of you collaborate through ABAI throughout the year in preparation for that conference?
Yes. We served as program co-chairs for this last year's conference, and we'll be co-chairing next year's program for the 13th annual Autism Conference in addition. And we collaborate on several other projects through ABAI as well.
Okay, great. And what are you finding? So I've got a list of questions, and these come from actually they're all Canadian-based listeners. But maybe we can start there and then kind of branch out. I think a lot of the concern is, wow, I've got a child and they've developed autism from whatever it may be in the environment, or they're just naturally predispositioned to having developed autism. The fact of the matter is that I've got listeners and they've got children with autism. So the question is, how do I go about helping the child? And I also want to, you can talk about this as well. You can talk about ABAI and how listeners can get involved in supporting that. But I guess if we start with the first question, this comes from a listener, Catherine Fernandez from Calgary. And the question that she has, and this can kind of go popcorn, so either one of you that feels inclined to answer this. The question is ABA better for older or younger people in the spectrum?
That's a great question. And I think because there's been so much media attention granted towards the diagnosis of young children with the disorder, and there's been so much focus in our discipline on recognizing autism early, because a great deal of research shows that the earlier intervention can begin, the better the prognosis. But applied behavior analysis is an evidence-based intervention for the lifespan for people of all ages. There's even a now growing body of literature showing its efficacy working with the elderly population. And that includes the elder population of people with developmental disorders such as autism. So we see behavioral programming at adult service agencies and residential facilities as likely as we are to advocate for ABA in school and early intervention settings. So it is very much a lifespan science.
Jonathan, do you have any comments?
Yeah, sure. I completely agree with what Ruth Ann said, and I'd like to add that really the way that ABA works is that we figure out what the learner is really passionate about, what they really care about in life, and we structure learning opportunities around that, around the learner's own interests and what they care about. And we provide lots and lots of practice opportunities and lots of learning opportunities. And we use scientific-based principles of learning and motivation. So really, when you think about it, that could be applied to anybody at any age with anything. And so, like I said, Ruth Ann and I have been working with folks really across the lifespan. I've worked with kids as young as 14 months old and men as old as 65 years old. And I honestly have not met a single person with autism who wasn't capable of learning. Everyone's capable of learning from the time you're born to the time you die. And sure, learning may happen faster at a younger age, and there could be some issues with neuroplasticity, meaning how much the brain is able to change, basically as a consequence of contact with learning in the environment. And sure, that is going to work better at a younger age with any treatment. But honestly, people do continue learning across the lifespan, and so ABA can be very, very effective at any age. And like with anything else, you need to customize it. So you're not going to do something that would be appropriate for a 3-year-old. You're not going to do that with a 16-year-old or a 60-year-old. You're going to customize it and use supports and prompting procedures and positive reinforcement that's appropriate for that particular individual in their context.
And what are some of the techniques that are used to customize in regard to age? Does that make sense?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Either way, Ruth Ann, do you want me to go? Either way.
Why don't you take this one, Jonathan?
Sure. Yeah, sure. So the first thing that we want to do is look at ABA is really about identifying skills that will help people thrive in their everyday life. And so the very first thing that we do in ABA is identify which particular skills are holding people back from achieving what they really care about in life. So if it's an adult with autism, it might be something like being able to use public transportation. Because then once an individual learns how to use public transportation, that opens up so many different opportunities. Now they can go to the movies, or they can go to the mall, or they can go to the park, and they don't necessarily have to depend on other people for transportation. And so something like that might be totally appropriate for a 20, 30, 40-year-old individual with autism, whereas obviously it would be totally inappropriate for a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old or something like that. So you really start with an assessment of what is holding folks back from getting the most out of life, and then go from there. And it needs to be just age appropriate. So, for example, cooking skills, making a snack, house cleaning, laundry, things like that that are appropriate for adults, we would definitely prioritize for adults. Mm-hmm. Whereas with younger children, we would prioritize things like play skills and early social skills, like being able to take turns and share with peers if the child is 3 or 4 years old. If those particular skills were holding the child back from getting the most out of social interactions and preventing that person from being able to successfully make and keep friends.
Now, is it possible? Go ahead. Sorry, Ruth Ann. Go ahead.
Well, I would add to that too. You had asked about teaching techniques. So a lot of people think of ABA as utilizing very structured instructional methods, and that is one thing that is sort of common regardless of the skill that we were teaching. One thing that very strongly characterizes behavioral interventions is that when we teach a lot of these skills Jonathan mentioned, we always want to think of whatever we can do to program for generalization, so that the person will come to display new social skills with new peers or people who they weren't explicitly taught to display those skills with initially, or they might be capable of grocery shopping in a new environment, for example. So that's something that very strongly characterizes behavioral interventions. Although much of the teaching is often very structured, involving fairly systematic uses of prompts and arranging consequences for accuracy, and contriving motivation so that people are highly motivated to learn and enjoy learning. We also tend to keep an eye towards how can we ensure that this skill generalizes and occurs in a range of new contexts and settings. And then also longevity or skill maintenance is also very important. So when instruction is no longer ongoing for a particular skill, how can we set our instruction up so that the person will still engage in these behaviors in a month, 6 months, or a year? What kind of natural consequences are out there that will sort of maintain the behavior?
Uh-huh. Do you find that maybe this is too broad, but do you find that persons with autism have different memory? Are they more prone to having memory loss or memory lapse and not being able to rely on what's been taught them?
No, I wouldn't say that is necessarily the case at all. a good teaching program is likely to result in skill maintenance for anybody. We might just need to program certain kind of more intensive instructional techniques so that skill maintenance occurs. It really, really varies greatly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's interesting because folks on the spectrum can have what we sometimes call splinter skills too, where actually some folks on the spectrum have almost like superpowers with memory, where
Right.
they'll have visual memory or memory with respect to letters or numbers that is actually way higher than your average typically developing child. So, or for rules or routines, for example. So, but it really just depends. I mean, the saying, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. And basically what that means is there are no generalities that hold across everybody with autism.
Mm-hmm,
But it is kind of interesting to note. Like I actually worked with an adult with autism once who had this incredible ability to do statistics and to do pattern recognition with data that really was just better than anyone else on my team. And he worked for me, and I had multiple other typically developing adults who worked for me too, doing research. And he was just better at stats than any of the quote unquote typically developing people, including me, so that was really interesting. Whereas maybe like the social aspects of work, maybe he wasn't so great at, but he had these other abilities that were actually really strong.
I've seen that too. In one interesting case, it was very profound piano abilities. So an individual who didn't talk but was highly skilled at the piano, and also skills with numbers, sort of accounting, budgeting type skills. And that's why we think of autism very much as a spectrum disorder, because it can encompass a very, very wide distribution of IQ ranges or intellectual functioning, and a very broad range of social skills. So a person could be completely non-vocal with autism, or very, very highly fluent with complex conversation skills. But I haven't seen these splinter skills across the board in every single person with autism.
No.
And I sometimes hear parents sort of almost hope that they can find it, or are kind of hanging their hopes up on wanting to find this splinter skill. So I think it's really important for parents and others to know that the splinter type skill may be a passion or an interest in something. We all have talents. We all have things that we're better at than other things. But it's not so much the case that there's going to be this huge, profound talent in one area necessarily that outweighs all of these other domains. So I think that's important for people to realize. I think the media has sort of created a false impression that you do sometimes see these really, really amazing talents, but it's really not necessarily the case in all cases.
It's uncommon. Jonathan, do you have anything to say?
Yes.
No, I would echo that for sure. So movies like Rain Man kind of give the impression that everybody has sort of these unbelievably, high skill levels. It exists, but it's pretty uncommon. Just like, extremely high skill levels or talents is uncommon in the typically developing population too.
Right.
Now, is that more Asperger's with that kind of focus on one particular talent? Is that more of an Asperger's identification or classification, or not?
I would say even within Asperger's, it's pretty uncommon, but the Asperger's end of the spectrum does tend to be just folks with that diagnosis tend to be higher intellectual functioning and typically developing or higher language functioning. So if you're going to see those sort of special talents, it probably is more likely in the Asperger's population than the general autism population. But even in the Asperger's population, it's pretty uncommon.
Okay, so let's go to the next question, and this comes, again, these are all Canadian-based. This comes from Melissa, based in Canada, and her question is, can you mention an example of an ABA goal? Ruth Ann, any comments?
Oh, sure, yes. Many.
Okay.
It could be the acquisition in a young child, for example, of requests. So teaching a child, for example, to request for help or request a preferred item. Moving on into slightly more complex social skills, a goal could be teaching a child to engage in social greetings or ask social questions over the course of conversation with others. And then moving on into adolescence and adulthood, Jonathan actually mentioned a variety of highly relevant skills before that behavior analysts would tackle. Behavior analysts might work on academic skills, for example. So curricular goals in school would be reasonable. Developing empathy, showing empathy or relationship skills, taking the perspective of another person as friendships are acquired. That might be something else a behavior analyst might target. And then, of course, as Jonathan mentioned before, moving on into adulthood, a goal might be how to keep track of one's financial earnings, how to use a checkbook, how to make simple purchases at a grocery store. It may even include signing up for college classes as a goal. So it, again, varies a great deal depending on the age of the individual that we're talking about and the interests and kind of the strengths and barriers that the person is sort of facing.
Okay. Jonathan, any comments?
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree. And the neat thing about ABA is its basic principles of learning and motivation that really can be applied to just about anything. So, there are folks out there who have systematically sat down and said, what is every single skill that a human child from the age of, about 6 to 8 months old, all the way up to adolescence, develops in the course of typical development, and let's try to kind of define what that skill is and identify how to practice it, how to teach it from an ABA perspective. And so there's literally thousands of goals that one can work on. But really the idea is to hone in on a few specific goals, maybe like 20 or 30 at a time at most, to work on that really will move that individual forward in their ability to function in a day-to-day basis.
So the next question comes from Karen Hope, and she asks, what's the difference between ABA and play-based therapy? Ruth Ann, you want to tackle that?
Sure.
Or John?
Oh, go ahead.
Either one of you.
Either one, yeah. Yeah, so I would say that it's kind of like a Venn diagram. Those are two totally different circles, but there is some overlap. So ABA it's based on scientific principles of learning and motivation, and there's a lot of different ways to do it. As Ruth Ann said, you can do it in a more structured way that doesn't look anything like play, and you can also do it in a very unstructured, very play-based way that doesn't look anything like practice. It just looks like an adult having fun with kids. But if you look a little more closely, you notice, wait a minute, there's a whole bunch of learning opportunities, right? Like instead of just playing with blocks, maybe the adult is sneaking in opportunities for the child to ask for the block that they want, or label the color of the block while they're playing with it, or pretend that the block is an airplane and make sound effects while it's flying in the air, or pretend that the block is a telephone and they're making a call to their friend, or, there's really a range of how you can use principles like positive reinforcement to teach folks on the spectrum, including play-based ABA intervention. And that's usually called incidental teaching or pivotal response treatment or natural environment training. Those are all names for play-based naturalistic ABA procedures. And then there's play therapy, which I'm not an expert on, and that's a whole different discipline that probably does overlap a little bit here and there with play-based ABA therapy, but is really a totally different area that I would say I'm not really totally competent to comment on, except that I know it's not based in the same scientific discipline of behavior analysis like ABA is.
Okay.
Yeah, I would echo that too, and simply say that a lot of very strong, highly effective ABA programming does look a lot like play.
Okay.
And in fact, kind of arranging it for young children so that it mirrors play and is fun is likely to be most motivating for the learner.
Are you finding? Do you find overlap? But your Your expertise would be more ABA, the more ABA approach for both of you. Would that be correct?
Oh yes, very much, very much.
Yeah. And in your approach, are you finding where the child or the person with autism, are you finding an increase in any of these cases in IQ points? Is that possible?
That's a great question. I think that there has been an increase over maybe the last decade or so in the number of individuals diagnosed with high functioning autism. Some of that sort of has to do with in recent years, the definition of autism has sort of broadened to where now we do know that people with intellectual functioning, even in the superior range, can have autism spectrum disorder. So I don't know that it's necessarily the case that there are more and more people with high functioning autism, but it's probably and very likely more the case that the definition has broadened to include those individuals. And there are more highly skilled clinicians and clinical tools available for diagnosing individuals with a range of verbal and intellectual abilities. But so if you're hearing about more cases of people in that high intellectual and cognitive functioning range, that probably is an accurate detection.
Now, is there an overlap at all with a condition, let's say, like ADD?
Yeah. So
go ahead, Jonathan.
Okay. Yeah. So there actually is a decent amount of research now showing that there is a lot of overlap between ADHD and autism. And, there's not supposed to be, like, I'm not an expert in diagnosis, but as I understand it, you're not supposed to be able to have both of those diagnoses at the same time. But people very often do, and people very often qualify for both. And like I said, there is research showing that if you do ADHD assessments with a bunch of folks who have a diagnosis of autism, a lot of them would test positive for ADHD. And the reverse is true too. A lot of folks with ADHD would also test positive for high functioning autism. So there definitely seems to be some overlap there. But I don't think that the scientific community knows much more than that, or at least not the last time I looked at the research.
Ruth Ann, do you have any comments there?
Well, I was going to add that we also see comorbid diagnoses of different psychiatric disorders among that high functioning population. So diagnoses of depression and anxiety are often fairly common in teens and young adults with high functioning autism, which actually just, sort of emphasizes how important it is, even though a person's intellectual functioning may be very high. Maybe they're attending college, maybe they went through high school without requiring special ed services, but having some of these social skill deficits can kind of open the door to a whole additional world of psychological difficulties. So that's kind of an important thing to keep in mind too.
Is there a benefit at the top of your head? Is there a benefit at all to combining ABA with other methods of therapy? And have you seen any success? If you've done that, can you give any examples of success?
Sure. Well, both Jonathan and I are working on a topic we mentioned earlier, known as acceptance and commitment training, or acceptance and commitment therapy. And there's a number of clinical trials for this particular intervention approach for a very large number of different clinical disorders. And new research is coming out showing its application to individuals with autism spectrum disorders and individuals with developmental disabilities. And it's basically an approach that sort of teaches people repertoires or skills for how to kind of distance themselves from troubling or distressing thoughts, and also to engage in behaviors that will help them identify and reach some of their goals in life, even though they might be depressed or even though they might have anxious thoughts. So kind of rather than suppressing or trying to push challenging thoughts out of the way and out of one's head, so to speak, the goal of ACT is to kind of teach people to take a step back, notice that they have these thoughts, but kind of recognize that they have goals in life and keep on moving towards their goals. And this is an area that is fitting quite nicely with more verbal individuals who are already receiving behavior analytics services.
Excellent. So kind of refocusing their attention.
Yeah, that's a way of thinking about it, or continuing to move towards goals in spite of one's thoughts is a way we like to think about it.
Jonathan, do you have any comments?
Yeah, so that particular area of interdisciplinary collaboration, that is combining ACT with ABA, has been pretty fruitful, and I'm actually guest editing a special issue of the peer-reviewed journal of Contextual Behavior Science that is dedicated to that specifically. That issue specifically is ACT and autism. And the issue of the journal is just about to come out in a few months, and we've got some really nice studies in it, including I think at least one by your group, Ruth, maybe two,
yes.
And basically showing that yes, indeed, ACT and ABA can be combined to produce benefits for folks on the spectrum, and also for staff and parents as well. So that's a very exciting area of research, and it's also worth mentioning too that. If folks are open and flexible, then ABA folks can definitely collaborate with folks from, let's say, speech therapy and occupational therapy. And what it really requires is both sides to be reasonable, accommodating, flexible, and open, non-judgmental. And there are, a lot of important lessons that various disciplines can learn from each other if they're willing to work together collaboratively.
Any thoughts on that, Ruth Ann?
Well, I was just going to mention, Jonathan is also serving as a program chair for an upcoming one-day conference or seminar on ACT that will be following the Association for Behavior Analysis International Annual Convention to be held in San Diego this May. So that's kind of an exciting thing. Tuesday, May 29th, there will be a special seminar devoted exclusively to acceptance and commitment therapy for applied behavior analysis. And so that'll be following the annual convention, and that'll be a great place for people who are interested in learning more about how to combine ACT in their work as behavior analysts.
And are there opportunities for people internationally that cannot make the conference? Are they able to tune in? Are any of these presentations that are given during the conference aired via Skype or any type of television syndicate or video syndicate?
Yeah, so many of them are, they're mostly not aired or streamed live, but most of them are recorded, and then people can buy access to watch it over the ABAI's website. I think it's called the Learning Center. Is that right, Ruth?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that's a really great resource. And then there's also actually a ton that's available on YouTube. If you go on YouTube and search, actually, if you just search my name, Jonathan Tarbox, there's maybe 100 or 150 brief, maybe 5-minute or so or 10-minute video clips discussing various techniques and demonstrating various techniques. And it's basically just a good resource for sort of little bits of information on different subtopics within ABA and autism that folks can then get oriented to, further information on that afterwards.
Excellent.
The website is www.abai and then international, so ABAINTER, etc.org, and there is a learning center, as Jonathan mentioned, and this is a place where people can browse videos, search for what might have been popular sessions from previous ABAI conventions, and so that's a really nice opportunity. And for those looking for continuing education, that's a possibility too.
Excellent. Let's go to a question from Marion Hibbert, and she's in High River. And the question she has for you is, what's the success or achievement for ABA therapy? Does that make sense to you?
Can you repeat that one more time?
Well, her question is this. What is the success or achievement for ABA therapy?
Okay, so yeah, maybe she's getting at kind of like what does effective ABA therapy look like? Like what kind of results can you expect? Or things like that.
Yeah.
And basically what that looks like is, I want to reiterate what I said before, which is in my 20 years of doing this, I've never met a single person with autism that couldn't learn. So the worst case scenario is that a person with autism, if they get a good quality ABA program, that this person learns a lot of really important skills that allow them to be more independent in life. Things like independent communication, so they can ask for what they want rather than having to just depend on other people to tell them what they want.
Right.
Toileting skills, so they can use a toilet or bathroom independently. Hand washing, self-feeding, basic social skills, leisure skills, so folks can keep themselves busy doing something productive and enjoyable rather than engaging in repetitive behavior. So that's the worst case scenario, is a lot of progress in a lot of really fundamentally important life skills. The best case scenario is, if kids get full-on intensive ABA, 30 or more hours per week, starting under the age of 3.5 years old and continuing for 2 or more years, about a third or so of kids that get that treatment approach at a high level of quality really don't need much help or support at all anymore. They're testing in the average range in social skills, language. They're functioning just fine in regular education without any specialized support. So really, that's sort of the largest treatment effect you might expect. And the worst case scenario, like I said, is still really a lot of meaningful progress.
Ruth Ann, any comments?
Yes. One thing I was going to mention, it is a little bit difficult to sort of predict what success across the board is going to look like. Used to be the case people would talk about an autism cure, which now we know doesn't necessarily exist. We do think of autism as a lifelong disability. So, a person may make extraordinary gains, but they still might be, looking at an adult life where they're going to need supports for much of their adult life to be able to live and work semi-independently. So that's just sort of an important thing to think about. So success, comes in small steps.
Yeah.
That could mean any number of skills are acquired, but for many people, lifelong support is probably important to know is on the horizon.
Overall, it sounds like both of you deliver a very optimistic message in that, in your experience of 20 plus years in the field, these children and these people, they have talents, they have skills. We've got to identify and then hone in so that they can develop those individual skills. But everybody, regardless of where they lie on that spectrum of disorder, they have something to provide to society. It's a very optimistic message that you do deliver.
Good. Well, it should be. There are very, very heavy volumes of research supporting the efficacy of ABA. So the reason we're optimistic is because of our science, really, and all of the data in support of behavior analysis.
So here's a question of a mother of 3. She's from Okotoks, Canada, and her question is this. It doesn't make sense to me, but maybe it makes sense to you. The question is, are movement breaks provided during APA inside in concentration and sensory regulation? Does that make any sense to either one of you? Does that resonate with either one of you? I can repeat the question that's been written to me. If you want, do you want me to repeat it?
I think I got it, or
okay.
If you want to take it,
go for it.
Yeah, no, I think I'm good. But it sounds like the person's asking if it's okay for an individual to take breaks during ABA therapy.
Okay, is that what you're getting, Jonathan?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, and whether or not they're getting enough physical movement and stuff like that during the day during ABA therapy.
I think a lot of good behavior analysts will recognize that if an individual, likes physical exercise and wants to get up and jump on the trampoline, for example, or play catch with a ball or engage in some kind of fun recreational activity, they'll build that into the intervention. And in working with kids in particular, even with teens, I think breaks and a chance for physical movement and exercise before you sit down and kind of work a little more intensely is obviously in order. So I think probably in most good structured behavioral programs, you will see opportunities for breaks and chances to, get up and run around and do something fun. Definitely, that should be part of it, and then especially capitalizing on the individual's interests. For example, we have an individual right now who, before he can sit down and do some serious work, he does a short jaunt around the football field, and then he's set for a little bit. So you kind of work it as is necessary for the individual. Most kids, it's difficult to sort of sit and do intense instructional work one-on-one. So,
Jonathan, anything to add there?
No, I very much agree. Ruth Ann's got it right on the money.
Now, do parents need training in some of these? The child has gone in with the session with the expert. How can the parent receive training for this when they're at home to work with their kids? Jonathan?
Yeah. So that's a really, really critical part of ABA therapy, and it's not a substitute for delivery of high quality ABA by professionals. That's still necessary, but it's really critical in order for that professionally delivered therapy to actually be as effective as it possibly can be. It's really important for the parents and any family members involved in the child's care. So it could be grandparents, it could be nannies, whoever is living with the child and caring for the child really does need to be trained in ways of effectively managing challenging behavior, but even more importantly, in ways of helping the individual learner practice and generalize and apply the learned skills to their daily life. So just let me give you an example. Let's say we're teaching a child, let's say one of his favorite drinks is milk, right? So we're teaching the child to say milk when he wants milk. So when he asks for milk or says milk, he gets milk. When he has a tantrum for milk, he doesn't get milk. Real basic request training or MAND training in the ABA jargon. And so once the child starts to show the ability to do that, it's really, really important that when the child is at home hanging out with parents or grandparents, when he wants milk, that they try to get him to say milk also. And that when he tantrums for milk or just points at the milk or grabs the milk, that he's not able to get it unless he at least makes an attempt at using that same word that he learned in ABA therapy. And what that's teaching the child is consistent application of these new skills across their daily life makes life better. And so it's really, really important for generalization.
Excellent. Ruth Ann.
That's exactly what I was going to say. So we were talking first about building in strategies to promote generalization and teaching parents, teaching teachers or staff, other caregivers, what they can do to promote language, promote proper social skills, etc. is exactly what is necessary to promote generalization. And really, parents are extremely important agents of behavior change. So in really good ABA programs, we should start to see that parents or other caregivers acquire some of the skills. And so it's not always kind of this other person coming in to work with the child. It's very much one of empowering a parent or a caregiver or a staff to learn behavioral techniques themselves and then work under the supervision of a behavior analyst and sort of analyze how the individual's behavior is changing and new skills are being developed.
And can you recommend perhaps any resources that parents could turn to? Any listener out there that is needing some extra help here? Any resources that they can turn to?
Well, you had asked for a little bit of information previously on the Association for Behavior Analysis International, and this is the primary membership organization for the field of behavior analysis. And as we mentioned earlier, there's a great deal of information available through the Learning Center. ABAI also publishes several scholarly journals. And there's a number of year-round conferences and conventions, as we mentioned, and opportunity for continuing education.
Fantastic. Jonathan, ABAI, same, any organizations out there that might be partnering with ABAI or as an alternative to ABAI, that's something that ABAI is not doing?
Yeah, so I would definitely echo what Ruth Ann said about ABAI, and then also in each individual state in the U.S. that folks live in, there's a chapter organization of ABAI, and I believe there's chapter organizations of ABAI in provinces in Canada as well.
Great.
Also, I would definitely recommend folks checking out an organization called Families for Effective Autism Treatment, or FEAT. And that is a very large parent organization that's run by parents, organized by parents, and it's very, very positive, and it focuses on providing parents with real-life, meaningful, practical information on what really works. And so connecting parents with good quality providers, connecting parents with resources. And I'm not entirely sure if FEAT is up in Canada, but I'm pretty sure it is. I'm pretty positive it is. So I definitely recommend people just Googling FEAT Canada or Families for Effective Autism Treatment Canada, and I'll bet you'll be able to track down that organization. And then also, there's definitely some books out there that are worth reading. So there's a book called The Power of Positive Parenting by Glenn Dunlap, right? Rushan, help me out with that. I think so, yeah. And then also Alan Kasdan has published a book or two on parenting that's very very, very helpful. And folks can just find those easily on Amazon if they just put in those names and those words.
How about Fred Volkmar? Is that a name that resonates with either one of you?
Mm-hmm.
Would you recommend it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm not too familiar with any books that he's written in particular for parents. So I'm just not actually sure, but I know he's done a ton of research. It's well respected on autism.
Okay.
Not so much focused on treatment. I think more focused on assessment and diagnosis.
Okay.
Yeah. I was going to say for sort of understanding the nature of autism, how it's diagnosed, what its characteristics look like at different ages. That's definitely a highly reputed scholar.
Well, I thank both of you for coming on the program. It was great meeting you. In closing, I just want to hand it off to each of you individually so that you can kind of give listeners some closing remarks, what they should be walking away with, something that you would want them to walk away with. Ruth Ann, we'll start with you.
Sure. Well, I think it's really important to keep your eyes out and make sure that when you're thinking about interventions, or you sort of hear people talking about different interventions or treatments, it's very important that we think about that which research has supported and the treatments or interventions that have a very, very strong scientific basis. Hopefully, one thing that's kind of become clear over the course of our discussion here is that ABA can take a variety of different forms. There's a lot of different skills it can be used to teach. There's a lot of different sort of formats that it can take, ranging from highly structured to much more naturalistic. But the principles are all the same. The principles are all based on the science of behavior, and that's really something that's important to keep in mind, particularly as people hear things on the media or hear things from others out and about. ABA is an evidence-based intervention, and although it might look a little bit different, it might be set up a little bit differently depending on the special strengths and barriers a learner might present with. It is all based on science.
And Ruth Ann, for listeners, do you have any books that they could be purchasing or a website they could be going to for you?
Sure. Well, I would definitely, of course, urge people to check out that ABAI website, and a lot of the books that Jonathan mentioned. I would also echo. There's a great journal that is published through ABAI. It's called Behavior Analysis and Practice. And this is a journal that is sort of known for the publication of kind of articles dealing with everyday behavior problems, issues that practitioners, parents, staff sort of might be struggling with. And this might be a really good source for learning a little bit about behavior analysis, but not in kind of highly controlled, highly theoretical laboratory sorts of studies. So I would strongly advocate for checking out Behavior Analysis and Practice.
Thank you. Jonathan, some closing comments and books and or website.
Sure, yeah. So the main thing I would say is if you're listening right now and you're a parent of a child on the spectrum, you already know that what you're going through is really tough. And research has shown that parenting someone on the spectrum can be about as hard in terms of stress as something like going to war. So it's really challenging. And the thing to know is you're not alone. There's hundreds of thousands of other people in the same club as you, and it's really worth reaching out and contacting and connecting with other families who are going through the same struggle. And if I could tell you one thing, it's don't take your mind too seriously. It's hard enough being a parent. We're going to beat ourselves up as parents. That's what humans do. And it's even harder when you have a child on the spectrum. And so, when your mind's telling you something like, I'm not doing good enough, I'm being a bad parent or something like that, just take it with a grain of salt. Don't take it too seriously, because we know that you're doing your best, and we know that life is tough, and that it's a really tough challenge that you've been given. So give yourself a break if you can. One really good tip is pick something awesome to do with your child on the spectrum that isn't for any good reason at all, that's just for fun, that you and he or she will genuinely just smile out of joy while you do it, and just do that every now and then for no reason other than enjoy that present moment with your kid. And yeah, keep your head up. I guess that's my main thing to say.
Great. Wonderful words. Very, very beautiful words. Jonathan, and any books or a website that listeners can go to for you?
Sure. Yeah, sure. So actually, I'll plug my own book here. Why not? But my latest book is called gee, I should know the name of my own book. It's called Training Manual for Behavior Technicians. And it's actually written for entry-level professionals, but it's right at that entry level, and it's written in very plain English and very easy to understand English with lots of practical examples. So it would actually be perfect for parents. If you want to learn more about ABA and become, take one step towards really educating yourself about what ABA looks like, this book is easy to read, and you'll actually learn a lot. And I think it'll be of practical help. So it's called Training Manual for Behavioral Technicians Working with Individuals with Autism. And Jonathan Tarbox and Courtney Tarbox are the authors, and you can find it on Amazon or wherever else.
Unbelievable. Wonderful. Guys, thanks so much for coming on the program and joining Winwood Radio. I look forward to inviting you back on the program and checking in on ABAI and the developments that organization has. Thank you so much for coming on the program today.
Oh,
Thanks
thank
a lot,
you
Ian.
for the invitation. This was a wonderful opportunity, and we're very grateful to you, Ian.
Okay. All right. Have a great day, and over and out. Talk to you later.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Ladies. Okay, I started that outro a little too premature. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Ruth Ann Rehfeldt and Dr. Jonathan Tarbox. Wonderful having both of them on Winwood Radio. This program continues to grow and continues to be very blessed and fortunate to bring on the caliber of people that it is bringing on. Autism, folks, is a reality. In my understanding, and I can't quote the source, but 1 in 68 children today. That number is increasing. So receiving critical analysis, recommendation, expertise from these two doctors is becoming more and more important. If you are a parent with autism, or if you know someone with autism, or with an autistic child, please direct them to the Association for Behavioral Analysis International. And as Dr. Ruth Ann and Dr. Jonathan just spoke about their contributions to the disorder, please look them up. That's Dr. Ruth, A-N-N-E, last name R-E-H-F-E-L-D-T, and Dr. Jonathan, Jonathan, Tarbox, Tarbox. I have their information up on my website. Please purchase their books. Reach out to them. Visit the ABAI website. I will be right back with my outro music here. I will be right back with some closing comments. Thanks for tuning into Winwood Radio. You have joined Wednesday's edition of Discussions. I'm your host, Ian Trottier. Follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Instagram. Visit my website. That's all. IANTROTTIER.